Hi, everyone. This is the Systems Change Alliance. I am Alexander McDonnell, and this is Phil Clothier here with me from the Barrett Values Centre.
Good morning. Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, great. So here in the Systems Change Alliance, we're focusing on the need for the world to transform at a systemic level and the celebration that there is so much good work already being done on that, in that transformation by so many organizations around the world. And the Barrett Values Centre is one of those organizations. Can you tell me a bit about what you do in the Barrett Values Centre?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's okay, what I'd like to do is share my screen. And I've got a bit of a story to tell about this. So can you see that? Does that come up okay?
Looks good for me.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Give us a message in the chat if there's a problem. Okay, keep on. It looks like we're good.
Good. Okay. So I know that it's only you and I on the call, but I would invite everybody here to start with this. And this is mostly to help me. Just to Good. Thank you. So I'd like to start just a little bit because all of these big changes all come down to what's happening inside of me and happening inside of you and us. And so I just want to tell you very briefly about me and how I got to be doing this work. And so this is pictures of me as a kid. And I had a kind of strange family. When I was born, my parents were running children's homes. I had over 350 foster brothers and sisters. And my family looked something like these pictures here, where like usually once a week there was a new child coming to the home, and so I learned a lot about two things. One was human suffering. Most of these kids were coming from very traumatic, broken home situations, all sorts of difficulty, and I saw a lot of suffering, but I saw a lot of love and care as well. And my parents' way was that as soon as anybody came into our home, they said they're part of our family and they need as much love and care and attention as anybody else. And that's the way that we run our home. And so that was my foundation. I didn't learn this stuff of human development by going to university. It was actually by osmosis mostly through my childhood. Second chunk of my life was in the technology world, and that was a fairly long career, nearly 20 years. And I ended up being the sales director of an IT PLC. Big paid job with a big car and all sorts of things. But what I focused on was happiness. I said the most important thing is for my staff and my customers to be happy. And that's all I'm going to focus on. And it turned out to be a tremendously successful strategy because we ended up making a lot of money doing that. But I wasn't worried about the numbers. I was focusing on the happiness. But I didn't have any model or framework from that. It just came from my heart. And then in 2000, I read a book called Liberating the Corporate Soul by Richard Barrett, which totally blew my mind. And it gave me all the language that had been in my heart that had never been in my head. And that's how I found out about this field of human development. And then I led the organization for 10 years, the Barrett organization for 10 years. And a few years ago, I thought that I would be protected from anything like my own inner process going wrong, but it did go wrong. It went seriously wrong. I had a burnout and a total mental breakdown about 5 years ago, and I'm still in a healing process from that. But that healing process is bringing for me new levels of peace and a new sense of possibility for how as I heal myself, how I can contribute. And that's a bit of what I'd like to share with you right now. So there are two key principles. If there's anything else in this, there are two key principles I'd like to share. One is we work in the field of values. And so the chorus principle here is we value what we need. And I'll come on to say more about that as we get into like what we're measuring and how we work with this. But we value what we need is absolutely a core principle of the work. And the second one is we are all connected. And to say more about that, if I look at this through the framework of what we're all trying to achieve to create a place of peace and harmony and well-being for everybody and to connect with nature, then we can look at it through this framework, where on the left-hand side, the foundation of organizational sustainability is personal sustainability. And that is any leader. It's you or me or Biden or Trump, and the degree to which we're concentrating on focusing on practicing our own inner work is the degree to which our organizations, our teams, our communities, which is that middle picture, will be able to be healthy and functioning and making a positive contribution. And the degree to which we do that is the degree to which we collectively can create a sustainable society. And so this, I'd like to tell you now one story which exemplifies this so beautifully. So in the early 2000s, I was asked by the chief executive of a bank in Latvia to help with the transformation of the bank. And he said something really interesting to start the process. He said, the transformation of this bank is about love. And in order to transform it, we need to bring love here. And I supported him and his executive team over the course of 3 years, and we saw a tremendous transformation at the bank. All the figures, all the customer satisfaction, the employee engagement, the profitability, all these things just went up. But there's also a sense of how the bank was now doing good. They were the mortgage and land bank for Latvia, and they took on a social purpose that was quite incredible. Now, the owner of the bank was the government, and the government said, how have you done this? How have you created such a transformation and such performance? And they said, this is the work we're doing. And the government said, is it possible to do this for a nation? And so in 2007, I was asked to go and talk to the Latvian parliament, and they said, we need to do this for our nation. And in fact, we did a values assessment of Latvia, the personal values of the people, how they saw the culture now, and what they would like it to be. And they used those results in an 18-month dialogue with the citizens in the villages, in the towns, in the cities. And those are pictures of the real dialogues that were happening. And they created the Sustainable Development Strategy for Latvia, which is a way of building education, transportation, finance, business, all those things of government policy for the first time ever in European history based on the values of the people. Now, are they finished? Is it done? Absolutely not. It's an ongoing process, and transformation takes time, so it's a process. But one of the other things we discovered is that there are underlying values that connect us while there are belief systems which divide us. And we saw this really strongly in the youth in Latvia, where there was actually almost like gang warfare happening in the streets. But we discovered that there was something deeper that brought them together. And this is a workshop with Russians living in Latvia and Latvian kids talking about how they can focus on rebuilding the future. So from one guy saying transformation is about love and him developing himself, to a bank transforming, and then the impact at a nation, that's how this pattern can operate. And I'm inspired by how others can explore that as well. One more quick story, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how the work works before we get into a chat. So this is this is an indigenous community in the northern states of Australia who had been subject to 150 years of government policy, which were completely contrary to the indigenous way of life. And so they had come to a total crisis point, high levels of drug addiction, alcoholism, very few people had jobs. There were high levels of family violence. And we did a values assessment. And one of my good friends who lives in Australia facilitated this community to transform themselves. It was not that she was coming in to tell them how to fix everything. She said, no, I can't do that, but I can support you in fulfilling your own vision, discovering again who you are and becoming that. And over the course of 3 years, we saw some incredible results. So 60% increase in employment by them doing that themselves, 80% reduction in children attending the safe house, and all of those markers of drug addiction and other, all came down. And we were able to measure that they were making a positive impact on all of these sustainable development goals, that in their way, in their small way through their community, making a positive impact in the world. And actually, in that part of Australia, the government have picked this up now as a way of society being able to heal itself as a policy, if you like. I would encourage you, as you're watching this, if you want to do it, you can actually, there's a free version of everything I've just talked about called the Personal Values Assessment. So if you go to valuescentre.com/PVA, you can do this yourself, and you answer the one question, select the values and behaviors that most reflect who you are, and you'll get a report. But I've heard stories of how this is being used in amazing places. So there's a hospice that uses this. They ask the dying patient to take it, and they ask the staff to take it, and they talk to each other about what's most important and how they actually care for each other during those final days of life. And also, I know that there's a group in the States where veterans are coming back from war zones where there's high levels of suicide. And they take this as just the baby steps at trying to reconnect with what's most important to them so they can connect to themselves and their families and their community. So try it for yourselves. It's something that's there, it's free, and I would encourage you to give it a go. So how do we work with this? How do we measure it? And I'll keep this really brief and just give you the headlines of it. And if anybody wants to know more, then we could talk another time. But so we start with a values assessment, which is very simple. First question, select the values and behaviors that most reflect who you are, not who you desire to become. Because we need to understand who are the human beings within that system, within the team, within the organization, within the corporation, within the government, within the nation. That's to say, we have to understand, like I said before, we value what we need. And so when we understand people's core values, we understand the systems we've got to create in order to fulfill those needs.
So I think it's worth kind of illuminating this bit a little bit.
Go for it.
So effectively, what happens when you take this values assessment is that you are given a list of something like 100 words.
Yes.
And you just look at those words and go, which ones are me? Which ones are important to me? Which ones? And you just kind of pick them out and say, yeah, this one. Yeah, I like growth. I like family. I like whatever. And so then it's got a very, very simple way of just looking at yourself and choosing what's important to me.
Exactly. And some people go pick, and they do it very easily. And some people like agonize over it. And, oh, is this me? Is this me? And what we find is that there's a kind of principle that says the transformation starts as soon as you're asked the question. And some people go into that inquiry, even as they're starting to answer this. But then you'll get the results and you can explore even deeper. But you're right. So you just select from a list that has been customized for that particular purpose. And then for the current culture, select the values and behaviors that reflect how your organization currently operates. And I'll show you a real one of those in a minute, because we list not only positive things like forgiveness and trust and teamwork and excellence, but we can have other words like blame, manipulation, greed, corruption. So we can see what's working well and what's undermining the organization or the system. And the third thing is select the values that you would desire for your organization. So let me show you now 2 real stories. So these
you have to explain this chart now.
I will explain this now, and I'll keep it simple. So on the left-hand side, organization A. First thing to say is that these are both in the finance sector in North America, working under exactly the same market conditions. But the middle question is select the values that most reflect how your organization currently operates. And the employees said, well, client satisfaction is the first thing. That's the number one thing we experience. And then making a difference, and then integrity, and then teamwork, and then humor, fun. And you can see the list of words in there. And each word gets a dot on the chart. So client satisfaction is a level 2 relationships thing. And financial stability is a level 1 viability thing. So you can see the number next to the word shows you where it falls on the picture. Now, the model is actually a bringing together. It's Richard Barrett's amazing work to bring together like the Western and the Eastern. So at the bottom, it is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the top, it really comes from the Vedas and put together. And so we can see this ability. In this case, this is an organization that's operating in a full spectrum way. So levels 1, 2, and 3 are really about how we take care of our own inner needs as people or as an organization. And levels 5, 6, and 7 are about how we make a positive contribution to the world or to our community. And level 4 is a state of ongoing evolution or transformation. So organization on the left is operating in what we would call full spectrum consciousness. Organization on the right, this is where the employees said, the number one thing we experience is blame, and then short-term focus, and then internal competition, and then buck passing, and you can read those words. So the red words show up as those white dots on the picture. And what we know is that 2 white dots will be enough to tell us that the organization will be failing to have engaged employees, happy customers, and delivering on whatever their mission and vision is. And I guarantee it will be affecting their ability to be financially stable as well, to make money. So you can run really corrupt, bad organizations with poor values for a short period and make money, but that is not sustainable. You cannot sustain that in the long term. And this I would characterize as a toxic culture. So with that many limiting values, we know for a fact that many of their staff will be having both physical and mental challenges of just having to show up and work within a culture that's that toxic. So this is the foundation of the model, and this will be in the presentation so you can see this afterwards. But as I said before, levels 1, 2, and 3 are really about creating a positive foundation. Level 4 is that evolution space, and levels 5, 6, and 7 is how we make a positive impact in the world. Now, I said that it is really important to understand the personal values of the people, and this is a real case. I changed the name of the company, but it is a real technology company. And you might tell that, so this is all 3 pictures. Who are the people, the personal values, how they see the current culture now, and what they would desire it to be. And this organization was also culturally and financially in trouble. And the leaders thought that what they had to do was to put more controls in place. And they were just about to implement a time clock system to make sure their staff showed up on time. Like, are you at desk on the time? And are you not leaving until the right time? And I remember the workshop because I was in the room with the executive team, and one of their executive teams said, "What the hell are we doing?" Our staff, if I look at the personal values, if you look at this list, our staff stand for honesty, commitment, reliability, integrity, and trust. And we're just about to put in a system that tells them that we don't trust them. And this was a huge aha moment of the importance of understanding who their people were. And they scrapped that time clock system and they told their people, we're not going to do that because we've just discovered who you are. And that was the moment of the leadership team for the first time, like understanding their people and connecting to them in a way that respected them as human beings rather than as just resources within the organization. And so within most stories like this, there's a moment where the bottom gets hit and then the transformation starts to come. But it can be painful, like is happening on planet Earth right now. I'm not sure we're there at this moment, but I'm not sure we hit the bottom. But honestly, there is such good work happening. Two more very quick things to say. Alexandra, am I talking too much?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I will interrupt you if you get boring.
Please do. So last year, about 6 weeks into the crisis, after the World Health Organization announced a pandemic, we decided to launch a global COVID-19 culture assessment to see how is the world responding to this and what's happening. And there's a full website or a full web page at least, with lots of resources that we've made the results completely open source so anybody can build on this, and lots are. But I'm going to show you 2 pictures from that. So what we saw was that transformation processes, which typically in organizations from start to really starting to see an impact would take between 5 to 7 years, happened in 6 weeks. It was actually like a miracle. The pandemic crisis had forced all the things that people, that's a big thing to say, many of the things that people desire to happen incredibly quickly. And if I were to characterize it, like it had gone from these things on the left, which were typical industrial age, which really comes from the foundation of the religious and the army systems that went into our industrial age, which was all about control and hierarchy and performance. And in 6 weeks, what we saw was something around people-focused adaptability and working together. There were really clear messages around well-being of our people is key, and we need to look after our people. So in 6 weeks, it went from very authoritarian to very human and inclusive.
It's nice to see such a positive view on the crisis.
Yeah.
Don't often hear that.
Well, and not everybody got it right. We absolutely heard stories of organizations who didn't get it right. But as a net picture, overall, like the global picture, we saw an incredible shift. And that was a response to a crisis. And will that be maintained? And that's part of what we're looking at now. How are organizations, how are governments then being able to maintain that? And so if anybody would like those full results, as I said, they're public domain, they're brilliant. And if you go to valuescentre.com/COVID, then you can get all of that and take whatever you want and use it how you like. My last thing to share is actually, I'm wearing the badge here based on how we're now adapting this work to a bigger picture, to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And if you haven't heard about these, then I would encourage you, just go and Google UN Sustainable Development Goals, because in my view, it's probably the most important thing happening on planet Earth right now. And all of the things that we, Systems Change Alliance, Conscious Capitalism, Greta Thunberg, we're all actually aligned in this big main framework called the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So what I've been doing, or what we as a team have been doing for the last 18 months, is aligning our work of values and culture to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I just want to read this statement for you, because this really gets to the center of why we're doing this. So Gus Beth is an environmental scientist attached to the US government. And he says, "We scientists don't know how to do that. I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystems collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." So I want to say that managing the ecosystems, agriculture, engineering, technology, IT, all those things are absolutely necessary. But they're all tools, and we can use them from the old consciousness that we used to have in the kind of industrial age, or we can use them from the new consciousness that is emerging now. And that's the part where I feel that with what you're doing and what we're doing and many others, we can make a significant contribution to this. So on the left-hand side, you see the picture of the UN sustainability goals. There are 17 goals, which 193 countries have signed up to deliver. And the good news is that many corporations and organizations are now aligning themselves to these goals to say, how can we help to support these? So even like
so there are things like poverty,
no poverty,
education,
yeah,
gender equality. There must be some environmental things in there.
So environmental things would be Goal 12, responsible consumption and production, Goal 13, climate action, Goal 14, life below water, Goal 15, life on land. So these were goals that actually came out from the Millennium Development Goals And the Millennium Development Goals weren't achieved, but they made such a huge change. Like global poverty was reduced by half through the Millennium Development Goals. And they said, well, let's not stop there. Let's expand this and do more. And so this is a vision for 2030. And many, many more organizations are aligning their purpose to this. But what they don't know is how to align their inner being, their leadership development, and their culture to it. And that's the piece that we've been able to work on. And so through this other piece here of these 5 Ps, people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnership, some of you might know about the work of sustainability looking at the triple bottom line. So going from just saying the purpose of a corporation is to make profit, well, John Elkington said it goes beyond that. We've got to, yes, organizations have got to be financially viable, but they've got to look after society and the environment as well. And the UN have added to that peace and partnership as key factors that we need to focus on. So when we do a values assessment, we can now map that into the UN goals through this framework. This is a real result. This is a real result of a large organization with over 200,000 employees. And you can see here that the top thing in their current culture, if I point to this bit here, mostly what they're focusing on right now is prosperity, which is okay. I mean, we need that. Organizations need to be viable and need to focus on that. And there's some focus happening here around partnership. But what their employees are telling them is that actually we've got to focus on all these things. We've got to focus on people and prosperity and the planet and peace and partnership. And
so I have to ask, this looks like it's very similar to your chart of the different colors and the different dots that you were making.
Yes.
But there are 7 categories in that, yes?
So yeah, absolutely. So with the chart that we create and have been using for the last 20 years, the Barrett 7 levels model, then that is looking at the consciousness of the organization and what's important to it, important to the organization and where it needs to go. We can take exactly the same values and map them now into this framework to say, so how does the organization map looking at its ability to be sustainable? So culturally healthy here.
So my question
is
this the same? Is this the same system looked at a different way, or is this a different system? Are we remapping the words to be a completely different alignment of categories, or are these categories almost the same as the values that are?
So we're mapping exactly the same survey and the same values to 2 different systems to be able to look at them through different lenses.
I see.
So when I worked with this leadership team, they had a huge aha moment with this, which they didn't discover through the other one. So they discovered a lot of other things through the other one. But with this one, I want to particularly point at this one here around peace, where they said, okay, the limiting values, we've got hierarchy, empire building, manipulation, blame, and power internally. If that's how we're operating internally, how are we ever going to be a force for good in the world? And they had this huge realization of actually they've got inner work to do. It's more than just strategy. It's more than just like the next level of productivity or excellence. There's actually their inner being really matters, and how they are in themselves and how they are as an executive team, and how that sends a message to the entire organization about how to really adopt all these areas of becoming more internally sustainable so that they can be a force for good in the world. I want to just finally make the link between how you address things, like what you're talking, environment, society, and economy. And one of the other big movements in the world is what's coming now from the capital investment markets, from like the biggest capital investment organization on the planet is BlackRock, but then Bank of America and many others who are turning the corner to become a force for good. And they also map into this framework here called environmental, social, and governance, and actually use exactly the same word, environment, society, and you use the word governance in your economy section here. And so they are saying now that when we invest in a corporation, we invest in this piece of tree planting or whatever it is they're investing in, we need to know that this organization, this group, this country is looking after the environment, is looking after society, and is looking after governance, because if they're not, this is not a good risk for our money. And so even from a financial returns basis, the big investment organizations are now saying this matters, and unless you, potential investee, are taking care of the environment and society and governance, you're not going to get our money, because that is not a good risk for us. And I would totally recommend anybody look at the report that covers this, called Force for Good, but the website is forcegood.org. And this is an incredible piece of work that shows how the global investment world is waking up to this. So for me, it's another good news story.
Fantastic. So the thing that I keep thinking about,
I'm going to stop.
Well, we'll get back to you.
We'll come back to that.
We can come back to that. But the thing I think is, we're talking about these really grand ideas and grand applications of this to a societal level.
Right.
Can it also be applied in a very small scale? Does it work for, say, relationships?
Yeah,
couples.
Absolutely. So, for example, the personal values assessment that I gave you, I mentioned to you, I know of couples who, in fact, one of my colleagues does this with his wife. So he takes it for himself and she takes it for herself, but they also take it again. So he takes it with her in mind and she takes it with him in mind, and they sit and they talk about, well, who are you and who am I, and what's most important to you and what's most important to us, and how do we see each other? And so this can absolutely be used at a scale of just me, my own internal understanding of myself, and you and me. So Alexander, you and I could do this for each other, and we could sit and we could talk to each other. In fact, I haven't done this recently because I don't lead the company anymore, but when I used to hire new people, I wasn't so interested on that they had the skills to be Java programmer, or that's basic stuff, but I would get them to take a personal values assessment and I would show them mine, and we would talk about who are you and who am I, and how might we work together. And in that hour, you often get to a soul connection. You start to understand people in a way that isn't possible. Well, no, that's not true. It is possible, but this is a way of getting there. So it works absolutely on that very small scale.
It'll be very interesting to see that in application. I took the personal values test myself, but I didn't feel the transformation of that. I felt like, okay, there's more to do than just ask yourself the question, what your values are. There's a need to dig into it and kind of understand something deeper in order to make something really useful out of this. So how do you approach this conversation that comes afterwards?
So that is absolutely a core principle of the work, that when we measure, the transformation doesn't just happen by looking at the results. And for some people, transformation might not happen. I mean, it might be in this lifetime that some people are not going to experience that. So, but what we're doing is we're opening a door to dialogue. And so, like on a personal level, like on a very small scale, for example, what I was saying about that hospice where they're using this, then they literally do get the medical staff and the dying patient to take this, and they say, like, as I said, who are you and what do you need? Like, what's most important to you in these days that you're dying? But this is who we are, and this is how you can interact with us. And what they found is that it's transforming that relationship of how care is happening. But because that's usually an incredibly stressful time for the family as well, when the family see that the care is happening in a totally different way, it starts to like calm down and create more peace within the family system as well, for them to be more accepting of that. And of course, I'm making it sound really oversimple, because different people will have different reactions in that at different levels of grief and ability to let go. But it's one of those things where at a really personal level, you can start to connect to people. I actually, on a very similar, I was running something just like this. It was a live streamed session, but some of the participants were on it, and one of the people was in a hospital bed, and she was really sick, but she had still decided, I want to come to this session. And we worked through in small groups on the PVAs, and she had this insight into how she had been a carer and a nurse all of her life and had never looked after herself. And so she had this huge aha moment into her own, like how she had been an amazing mother and carer all of her life, but had not taken care of herself, and why she was kind of in the position she was in. And whether she was end of life or not at that moment, she didn't know. She could have been, but she felt like this understanding had emerged in that moment.
Can you, yeah.
Let me just say,
go on.
Let me just say that many people who've done a lot of their own inner development work, they'll look at this and they'll say, yeah, that kind of confirms who I am. So I get it. But for most of the world's population have never been asked this question: who are you, and what do you value? And for some people, it opens a door for them to start to explore.
Can you take us through the 7 categories that you work with?
Oh yes, of course. Let me go and find a picture of that.
So these 7 are, like 7 is a number that comes up a lot, yeah?
Yeah.
7 notes in the musical scale.
So yes, it is. I guess
in the rainbow.
If we wanted to look at, and it is colors in the rainbow, it also, and we don't always use this language in the first meeting in the boardroom, but it is also a reflection of the human chakra system. Some people might understand or know about the human chakra system, but so what Richard Barrett did was to take Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and actually in exploring that, there was at one point in one of the books that Abraham Maslow said, people don't really understand what self-actualization means. This needs to be expanded. It needs to be explored to make it more accessible. And so Richard felt, hey, it felt a soul calling. That's my job. And so he studied a lot further into Maslow, but also was looking at all fields of chemistry and psychology and spirituality, and found the Vedas from the Indian philosophy or from the Indian work, and realized these things fitted together. So at level 1, it is really about, do we have our basic needs met? And for me, or for you, this is about, how's my health? Do I have enough money to buy my next can of baked beans? So for some people who live in a war zone, like they really are in danger of being shot if they walk outside of their house. So this is about those basic survival needs, and how do I keep myself safe in that situation? And then we go to relationships and building basic relationships. So it would be as simple as, like, as I walk into work in the morning, do I smile and say good morning to my colleagues, and just create that sense of camaraderie? And how's my sense of friendship, and how's my sense of family? And of course, we all have challenges with our family and friendships at some points in our life, but am I prepared to invest in that and to make that work? Because a sense of belonging is a basic human need. And then what comes after that is, you could call it performance, or you could call it self-esteem. The need to be recognized and acknowledged. So the need to have some sort of skill so that I can learn something. And so actually this evolves in the same way that human life evolves. As a baby, we come in at the beginning with viability needs to just, I've got to be fed. And at level 2, I've got to be held and cuddled and loved. And at level 3, when I get into my first playground, like, oh, well, that kid's wearing Nike shoes and I'm not. Or like, oh, they're good at playing football and I struggle with that. So those self-esteem needs, they start to emerge at that stage. But at some point, this point of question in my life of evolution or transformation, where it's like, oh, all the beliefs I had about my family systems and my religion and all those sort of things, I wonder if that's true. And I wonder if that's true to me. And do I want to continue to be that and live that for the rest of my life? So this moment of having the courage to challenge the status quo starts to emerge. And I would say that your whole organization is that. It is the courage to challenge the status quo, to say, is there a way we could do this better? And so I see, like, actually, you do much more than just that. But at the core of what you do, you're courageously evolving yourself so that you can courageously evolve how business.
This is what the name means, isn't it? We're saying systems change.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But clearly the vision is about some of these higher values as well. Let's look at those.
Well, let's go up from there. So level 5, we call alignment, or we could also call it internal cohesion. So what's the glue that holds me together inside? So the emerging sense of purpose that I feel, and how we together in an organization connect around that sense of purpose. Because with Systems Change Alliance, when people say, oh my goodness, I really feel energetically connected to that, and they come into alignment with that, and you can start to express that. And then at level 6, you start to discover collaboration, where Systems Change Alliance says, Barrett Values Centre and Conscious Capitalism and all these others, how do we work together to do this? And then at level 7 is where you're truly living your purpose. And this would be any of us who have shifted into that space of true purpose. But if I gave examples, it would be like Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela, who have got to that level of wisdom and integrity. And does it mean that they have completely let go of all their fears? No, it doesn't. Because I know that Mother Teresa went through terrible internal struggles in her own mind, in her own being, while she was still being of huge service to others. So all of this is a framework to explore how we as individuals and we as organizations can become healthier and more aligned and make a positive contribution. Now, one thing to say is that higher is not better in this model. So we see a lot of charities, for example, who have fantastic values and aspirations up at levels 5, 6, and 7, but they're really bad at handling money. And they're level 3 with systems and processes and excellence are just like not very good. So and we
have a danger of this in the Systems Change Alliance. So we're trying to work on these bottom ones, which we're not as good at.
Right. So
but at least we recognize that we need it.
Yeah. But what that does is it undermines the ability for you to actualize on those ambitions you have to make a positive contribution. So Maslow called this a hierarchy. And in a sense, that's still true. But actually, I see this as more architectural rather than hierarchical. That when we get a solid foundation at level 1 in place, then we can start to build levels 1, 2, and 3. That's why we call it foundation. And then we can start to build those other pieces on top.
I think it's a kind of important concept, the concept of holarchy, that there is levels, but the levels are not different in value. So in a country or in the world, we have the whole world, and we have a nation, and we have a city inside that nation. Inside the city, you have a neighborhood, and in the neighborhood, you have, a household, a family.
Right.
You have the individual in that. Which one is the most important? It's like a stupid question, yeah? It's like they're all important. But they're all obviously different scales of looking at things. And I think that this kind of circles inside circles is more the kind of way to think about it, rather than up and down, and one is more important than another.
Yes. And I want to add to that, because there is a sense in which, as we start to go through the levels, we expand our levels of consciousness so that our world becomes bigger. So I could absolutely live by the values of caring, sharing, and fairness. And my world is as big as my family. So I can go 3 doors down, I can go and rob their house, and I can bring back all the stuff, and I can live caring, sharing, and fairness. But when my world becomes as big as my village, Or when my world becomes as big as my country, then I see all those people as, oh, actually, they're me. And I could be caring and sharing and all those other things with them. So this is a vital question about how big do we see our world? And if I were to take a real example, a couple of years ago, there were speeches at the UN from Donald Trump and Jacinda Ardern, who's now the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And of course, we know Donald Trump said, America first, make America great again. And we're going to do whatever it takes to look after ourselves, basically. And Jacinda Ardern said, I'm a proud New Zealander, and I'm proud of my heritage, but I recognize that I'm a citizen of planet Earth, and New Zealand exists as a part of planet Earth. And unless we share and make the whole of planet Earth healthy, then we can't thrive and survive ourselves. And that is a perfect example of these levels of consciousness that say, how big is my world? And therefore, how big is the world that I care about and want to make a difference within?
Mm. When you look at those 7, what do you call them, levels?
7 levels.
7 levels. They're very familiar to me from my mystical experience of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one beyond the 7. There is another thing that happens. 7 is the level where you feel the unity with everything and care for all and have this passion to serve. But there's a mystical experience beyond that where you kind of go into the nothing. Mm-hmm. There is a empty nirvana is the popular word we have for it.
Right. Say more.
I wonder if that well, nirvana is the experience of what we might call the void, mm-hmm. or sometimes it's called unqualified consciousness. It's like consciousness which has no direction. It's mm-hmm. not looking at anything. Normally our awareness, our consciousness is always looking at the world, at this person, at myself, at the food, at my desires, at my thoughts, whatever it's looking at.
Yeah.
This is consciousness which is not looking at anything.
Right.
And so it's very hard to describe because it's like there is nothing there.
It's completely beyond words.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like every word is looking at something, and so
right.
you can't describe it. And so people just actually, it's a funny thing because mystics all around the world from different traditions who didn't speak to each other all talk about it exactly the same way, and they always say that you can't talk about it, you can't explain it.
No.
And then they give a list of things that it's not.
Right. Yes.
It's not hate, and it's not limited, and it's not small, and they don't say it's big because big is the wrong word. It's not exactly big, but it's definitely not limited. Yeah. So there's this experience, and I wonder if there are values associated with it, but I'm not sure what that would be.
Just hang on a second. I like everybody else, I'm working in like home puppy land, so I can let my puppy out the door, and I'll be back with you.
Yeah. Okay. So it'd be very interesting to look at these this map of values and see if there's the great mystics, the ones who experience this great beyond, what they say their values are, and are there some extra values in there somewhere? I don't know.
So the answer is I don't know the answer, but I can explore for a moment. And in fact, very briefly, in very short moments in my life, I have experienced that thing called the void. And I wouldn't even say for me it was, so I can tell you what it's not. It wasn't even peace, because it was nothing. And but that's why we have to continue to practice to be able to find those moments. And that's why at the beginning of this call, I said, please help me to breathe. Because it's these very simple practices, and breath is probably one of the most powerful practices we can have to even get a little bit closer towards that. I don't know if you saw it, but I've just finished watching a Netflix series called The Queen's Gambit, which is about
I did see it.
An orphan girl. And in the penultimate scene, the last match of this chess match, this young girl who was playing the Russian master She obviously she would like he did a move that she wasn't expecting, and she closed her eyes and she breathed, and then she reconnected, and then I won't tell the story, but that it was worth watching the whole 7 hours
just
of that thing
moment.
for that one moment. It was absolutely incredible. So maybe there are some values or expressions that are going to evolve. But
I'll tell you some of my thoughts on it.
Go on, please.
In the talent dynamics and wealth dynamics system, which also works with a similar system, but in a different way, not about values, about structures. The violet, the 7th level, is about transforming the world,
right,
in your lifetime. The ultraviolet, the beyond the violet, this is about dying well and leaving an impact that goes on through the generations beyond your life.
Yeah.
So this is not about acting. This is about being something that is bigger than yourself. So it's like surrendering into it rather than acting.
Yeah.
And so I think the value becomes something about beingness, presence, or something like that. And I'm just going to be here, and I'm going to be present, and in my presence, maybe that will affect others. I suspect that's something to do with it.
You also said the word surrender, and that was the word that captured me in what you just said. I have to tell you, I'm having an inner reaction to this. So as well as totally enjoying this, my mind is at the same time. So I've got this piece here that's enjoying it, and this other piece over here telling me you're not good enough to have this conversation. You don't know as much as Alexander, and you're like, what gives you the authority or the ability to be on a call talking to others about this? And so this is really interesting that I'm kind of getting to all those things are still really true, but I'm getting to the point where I can observe it happening, and I can choose whether to succumb to that or not. And it's actually a bit of a fight going on in me right now. So
interesting. I have to say that if you've experienced it, then you're totally able to talk about it, even if you don't experience it all the time. There's so many of us out there who haven't experienced this.
Yeah.
And if those of us who have experienced start talking about it, even though you can't talk about it, talk about the fact that there is something there that you haven't, that is worth experiencing.
Yeah.
I'm sure that in itself has a value.
But so I completely agree with that. And I would also say that that what we experienced with the COVID survey results I showed you, where I feel, not just in that, but in many interactions I'm having, that there is this shift that's happening right now. It's messy, and it's really difficult, and it's probably going to get more difficult than it is right now, but I absolutely see it happening. And so a shift from an old way of being and thinking to a new way of being and thinking is absolutely emerging right now. And these are the steps we need to take to get to that point of what you described as ultraviolet. But will we get there in our lives? No, because ultraviolet was actually how you die. You die.
It's how you die. It's not how you live. There's actually a concept in the mystic tradition of spiritual death, where you become so enlightened that you can't live in your body anymore, and you just you just meditate and never come back.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's exactly what we're all aiming for in this lifetime. I think there's a good value in playing around here for a bit and enjoying the other values.
Yeah.
And just recognizing that these ones exist.
Yeah, totally. I went on a course a few years ago, and I met someone who was walking around these beautiful gardens. She was a villager, and she was walking around, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I wanted to say I've come to learn how to be a spiritual being, but the words that came out was, I've learned to come how to be a human being. And it felt so much more congruent. It's like, oh my God, I've got so much more to learn of just how to be a human being before I do that bit.
And then a lot of people do it the other way, learn to be a spiritual being first, and then go, hang on, how do I actually live my life? I kind of did that one.
Yeah. Oh,
Telephone ringing in the interview. That's terrible.
that's the bike shop
I was
telling me
just
my bicycle's ready.
watching a video this morning about a classical violinist who had a Nokia telephone call in his classical concert.
Right.
He responded perfectly. He started playing that melody. And then did an improvisation on it, and everyone cheered. It was fantastic.
Fantastic.
So what do you think the 3 most important changes, systemic changes, are that we need to see in the world?
Okay, well, I'm going to answer for me. For me, for myself, it is my own process of healing and focusing on peace. So that would be number 1. And then the second is wow, this is really tough.
People often have trouble with this.
Yeah.
If we take away the number 3, it's not so hard. If you just think of what changes would you like to see in the world, maybe there's only one that it's not as difficult.
I mean, that I only have 2 actually. Yeah. I've got 2. One is my process of inner peace and healing. You know what? You've just actually, by saying that, you've just emerged for me what I truly believe the 3 big things are, and I actually believe these are true not just for hospitals and religious organizations. They're true for every organization and every entity and every government. So one is to do no harm. And there are movements now coming with zero carbon and circular economy and all sorts of things like that. So do no harm from both a physical standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint. So that's number 1. The second is to alleviate suffering. Whatever we can do, and that's working on ourselves and others to alleviate suffering. And the third is to facilitate healing and thriving. And I believe that these will become the operating principles of all organizations over the next 20 years. That at core, that's what they'll say. Actually, we've got these 3 jobs. So first is do no harm. Second is alleviate suffering. And the third is to facilitate healing and thriving. And it doesn't matter whether we're Ford Motor Company or Pfizer Chemicals or Walmart or a small team mowing gardens. I think that they're the 3 things.
Do no harm. Alleviate suffering.
Yeah.
So this is
Facilitate.
Don't make any more suffering, and then also take away some suffering. And what was the last one? Facilitate
healing and thriving.
Healing and thriving. So that's kind of like moving from the suffering to the joy.
Right. But I do believe that everybody has choice within that. And even if the systems are there to create the possibility for that to exist, then everybody has to make their own personal choice to step into that, to be that as well. Okay,
lovely to have you. We'll have to finish here.
Okay.
We could talk to you for hours, but I won't.
Thank you,
Alexander. Not today. So see you, everybody, and see you, Phil, soon.
Okay.